grad school interviews, get ready for the cues, both those that you'll be answering and those that you'll be asking. And so I know that it can seem really intimidating, but really just be you. And so be authentically you. You should have this enthusiasm for learning, and you should let this enthusiasm shine through. This is what they really, really want to see. Because this enthusiasm for learning, it's basically like one of the biggest, most important things that's actually going to get you through grad school, at least without like being really, really miserable. And so you want to have this, you should have this enthusiasm for learning, for this school, for this program, for the science going on. You should have this enthusiasm already. And so you just need to let that show. And so I think a lot of people, they get really, really nervous, and it's hard to really let that show. But know that they have invited you there for the interview, or if it's virtual, they've invited you for an interview virtually because they see potential in you. And so you just need to show them that, yes, you were right, I have potential. And note that it's totally, like, don't feel like you don't have potential if you didn't get an interview somewhere, because there's so much luck that goes into everything, and you can't show them everything on paper. And so, like, you don't, please don't take anything I'm saying as making you feel down if you didn't get an interview somewhere. But also, if you did get an interview, please take a minute to really, like, congratulate yourself. No matter what happens, you've made it to this point. They see potential in you, and you want to show them that they were right. And so I'm going to share some of the tips that I have, but since I've only been like on the hot seat on the interview side, I'm also going to give you some expert advice. So I sought out from some people who know really, really well, and I've been on a lot of admissions committees. And so I have talked to my PI, Dr. Lemore Joshua-Tor, and I have also talked to Dr. Alexandra Newton, president of the IUBMB, and they've given me some awesome answers to some of the questions I had about the things that they're looking for, and advice for how you can prepare.
So it's really important to remember like what it is you're interviewing for. And so you're not interviewing to be a technician, you're not interviewing to be a professor. You're interviewing for a training position. So they know they're not expecting you to know everything. They're not expecting you to know every single technique. They can teach you techniques. They can teach you how to either give you the knowledge, teach you in classes, or teach you how to read papers better and like really learn on your own and gather all this information. So they can teach you those things, but they need to see that you have that passion that's going to compel you to search out the answers, to compel you to really devote yourself to trying to learn. And so they want to see that you're someone who is enthusiastic about learning, and someone who has that ability already like developing to think critically about science. And so this is where it's going to, later I'll talk more about how you should be prepared to talk about your research in a way that shows that you're thinking critically about it, both in terms of why you did what you did and how it fits into the bigger picture. Don't worry if this research that you did is unrelated to what you want to do. Nothing like that is going to hold you back. At this point, basically, your undergrad training, it was important for laying the foundational concepts, yes, very much so. But it was also in terms of your ability as a researcher, it was really important for getting you into the scientific training mindset and also giving you a sense of what it's like to do research and whether that's something you really want to do. But that shouldn't, like, I know people who've like totally changed their fields after undergrad, and that's totally okay because you're interviewing for a position to train. And so this is a great opportunity to show them that you know how to think like a scientist. And even if you're not sure what you want to do, like what exact research you want to do, now's really the time that you'll get to explore and really, really find that what makes you really happiest, hopefully. And so I'm gonna give you some advice from people who really know. So Doctors Lemore Joshua-Tor and Dr. Alexander Newton, and then also pop in with some of my own thoughts. So obviously I've never actually been giving an interview for grad school, and I haven't been inside one of those committee rooms. But I've gotten the impression from like talking to various people and things that really at this point, if they like your grades, your test scores, whatever, that's really helped you get to this interview point. And now at this interview point, the interview is going to matter a lot more. And so they already see great potential for you, and the interview is like a two-way thing. So they want to see that you're right for their program, and then they want you to like see that the program is right for you, because if they've invited you for an interview at a lot of these places, it means that they really, really want you already. And they're just kind of like making sure, but they're also wanting you to see like, yes, come to us. So I know things are a lot different since the pandemic, but they used to at least do like big recruitment weekends where they would take you out to big events and like wine and dine you. I didn't do the wine, but it was totally fine. So don't worry if you don't drink. And really show you around and really try to convince you that the place is a really cool place to be. So you kind of like going into things, you're just like, I at least was in this feeling like, oh my God, like I need to totally impress them 100% of the time. That's my only task. But then it's really important to realize that this is going to be a place where if you do get admitted or accepted, and then you accept the exception, then you're going to be spending like years of your life there. And so you really want to make sure that it's a place that you're going to be happy with. If you're not happy with any of your options, don't like, I would say like you can wait a year. Like you don't have to accept an option if you don't think that you'll be happy there, because it's really not worth it to be miserable for years and years. Okay, so all of that being said, let's get into the actual better advice. So Dr. So Lemore, my PI, so I asked them how like people should be preparing for the interview. And so she says that you should give some thought to and be prepared to answer questions about like why you want to go to grad school, what are you looking for in a graduate school, and why are you looking at that particular graduate school or program. So this gets into what I was just talking about how it's important to make sure that the program is like right for you. And so this can involve things like cost of living, stipend and stuff. I know people don't really like to talk about that sort of thing, but it can be really expensive to live in a lot of places where these programs are. And you want to talk to, like, if you possible, talk to fellow graduates, talk to like graduate students there and stuff about how they like it, about how the area is and that sort of thing. So I wouldn't be like asking about stipends like in your interview with various professors, but it's something that you should try to get more information about before you make a final decision. But before, as Dr. Newton points out, like you should have read up and done some homework about like the program that you're interviewing at. So both in terms of, you're going to be interviewing typically with like many different professors. Sometimes they'll give you options beforehand, like on the application, you can choose professors that you're interested in interviewing with. They don't promise that they'll be available, but sometimes you'll get interviews with people that you have expressed interest in. And I should mention that this is totally from like a biomedical program perspective, where you basically interview for this program and then you rotate in different labs before you decide and that sort of thing. So in this case is like, you're not interviewing for people who, I mean, you might be interviewing with someone who you will eventually work in their lab, but it's not like these are the people that you're going to be choosing between sort of thing. Typically, like you'll be interviewing with a bunch of different people who you'll have basically no contact with in the future, probably, or very limited. So don't worry about that. But typically beforehand, they usually give you a list of the people that you're going to be interviewing with. And so do your research. So So Alexander says, like, do your homework and read up on the research of the professors on your schedule. And this way, if the professor says, do you have any questions for me? You can ask them to tell you about your research, and then ask them a question about it. And so this is where it's helpful to have done your homework. So I'm not talking about like, she's not talking about like you have to deep read every single paper that they did, but get a general sense of their work. And try to, like, if you read one of the papers, like, and you see that there's a question that you have about it, or it reminds you of something and you want to ask them about it, like, that's going to be a really good thing if you can then ask that question, especially because a lot of times it can get kind of awkward when they're like, do you have any questions for me? And you're like, can I go now? You know? So yeah, it's really great and they often really like talking about their research. But they'll really like if they see that you're engaging with it and not just sitting there with like glazed over eyes as they tell you about their research for the 54th time that day. So you want to really engage with them on that sort of thing. And so I would also add that, like, after the interview, this is the preparing slide, but after it's nice to like send a thank you note to the people that you interviewed with. Okay. So this is preparing for like the actual interviews in terms of what sort of things that you should be prepared to like doing your homework in terms of what you're wanting from other people type of thing. That was weird, but that was my awkward way of trying to segue into preparing to talk about your own work. And so this is a really important part of things. And so I found over and over and over, and this is Lee states this really, really well, that it's important for them to know the big picture, why they did that project. And so I've listened to a lot of different talks by students and that sort of thing. And I know that I've struggled with this, is that we get so into the nitty gritty of our projects that it is hard to kind of like people in the audience, they're not going to care about how many microliters you pipetted into a tube. They're going to care about the bigger picture. Similarly, when you're doing these interviews, you should be prepared to talk about the why of your project. So, and this shouldn't be like, yeah, I pipetted those 2 microliters because the grad student next to me told me to pipette 2 microliters. You should be able to really know why you were doing what you were doing, and like, how did you contribute to your own research? Like, it wasn't just you were following a formula. You had to, like, you were thinking critically about why you were doing what you were doing. And you should be able to put this in the bigger picture of like, be able to think about like, if you had, it's really, so sometimes it can be really, you feel like, if you say like, oh yeah, well, I tried for 5 months and I kept having these problems and I tried this and I tried this and I tried this and I tried this, and you're like, oh my God, I spent 5 months and I like finally cloned 1 plasmid, but it took me 5 months. And so then you're kind of like embarrassed, like, do I bring up all the time I wasted, or else it seems like I didn't do anything, but I really was working hard. And the truth is that they like to see that you know how to troubleshoot. They like to see that you know how to fail, because that's one of the big things. I actually, like, some people I experienced in interviews was that they would actually ask you like, so you know that I know there's like a lot of straight A students like you that come in here and they've never like failed before, and it hits them really, really hard. There's a lot of failure in science. Are you going to be okay with this? And if you can then say like, heck yes, I failed so many times. Well, I mean, don't say it like that excitedly, but say, yes, like, I know I have had to troubleshoot through a lot of different aspects of my work. There was this one issue or blah, 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 and then go. So it's important that you actually kind of like, science expects that there will be failed experiments, that there will be a lot of troubleshooting and optimization. That's going to be a huge part of grad school. And so it's totally okay if you like own it. If you like don't, I'm not like saying that you should like seek out failed experiments, but it's being able to not just try the same thing over and over, but really use like, why did that experiment not work, or why did I get an answer that was different from what I thought? That could reveal some really interesting biology going on. And then if you can then show how you further explored that, and then how you were able to overcome the problems, or to find new answers from what initially seemed like a problem. Okay, so that was kind of like segueing away from, but let's look at Alexandra's advice in more specifics. So yeah, so give sufficient background on the project to for the interviewer to understand the goal of your undergraduate research. And so this could also be like if you did research after your undergraduate, maybe took like a gap year, or maybe did a master's program. So basically, this goes back to you get so ingrained in your own work that you forget that other people don't know the field like you do or whatever, especially because you're probably going to be interviewing people who like research totally different things than you. And so you want to be able to give sufficient background on the project to them so that they can understand. This also goes back to kind of doing your homework about the various people who might be you're interviewing with, because if you know their backgrounds, that can help you know how to, like, what level of background or whatever you should be talking to them with, and what sort of things about your work you might want to emphasize. So if you are interviewing with like a mathematician, that's going to be a lot different than if you're interviewing with like a cell biologist, and even within like a cell biology field or whatever, there's all these different fields. So if you know their background a little more, then you'll have a better sense of what level of detail, maybe what aspects of your project they might be most interested in that you can tell them about. It also helps doing your research beforehand, also helps knowing kind of like what questions you might be expecting from them. They're likely to ask you questions that have to do more with what they research in terms of like how your work might fit into that sort of thing, or thinking from that perspective, like from a statistical perspective versus from like a cell biology perspective, that sort of thing. So that's also going to come up later when you're doing like your thesis committee and various things. But anyway, okay, so don't focus on the techniques. Instead, make sure you can explain the bigger picture. Booyah, see both. We're all in agreement here. And how your experiments were aimed at solving a piece of the puzzle. So this goes back to the why you did it. And so don't worry about like if you don't so when it comes to techniques, yeah, so Alexander says like be prepared to explain how a technique works if they ask you, and don't say anything that you won't be able to explain. And so if it's really important to know how techniques work, or at least the general idea of how the techniques worked. This goes back to kind of like why you were doing it. If you know how things work, you know how you can interpret the findings and also be able to troubleshoot in that sort of thing. But it's also important to know that the techniques that you have are not the techniques you come in with are not limiting what you will ultimately do, kind of thing. So basically what I'm trying to say is that they don't expect you to know every single technique that you're going to need to do your PhD project. Techniques are things that they can teach you. Techniques are like probably one of the easiest things that they can teach you in terms of, I mean, like the techniques take a lot of work and a lot of practice and a lot of everything. But it's really, they know that they can train you on those things. But they really need to, with the interviews, it's more about seeing like, do you have the scientific mindset already? Are you thinking critically about science? Are you thinking like a scientist? Do you have this passion for learning? These are the things that really are going to help you advance through grad school, succeed as a scientist. And so the techniques that you come in with, don't worry if you don't have all the techniques. You're interviewing for a training position. Okay, so and be prepared to explain concepts of the project. And I think it's really important to kind of going back to the why and the bigger picture. You should be able to so a lot of times your undergraduate research or whatever, if you're doing like a summer research program, it kind of just like ends like in the middle of an experiment type of thing. They're not like actually like on the bench timer going, but there's usually still a lot of unwrapped up visions, unfinished things. And so you should be able to kind of talk about, if you were to keep doing the project, what would the next steps be? What would you do next? Where do you think this project could go? How does it fit into the bigger picture? And also be like, if you have presented your work somewhere or whatever, that's also really good to bring up. So basically, be showing that you kind of know where your project, know that your project is a piece of this puzzle, not the whole puzzle, but that it's important in its own way, but it fits into this bigger puzzle. And you should be able to kind of like see how that, talk about how it fits into the bigger perspective. And I know I'm like hammering on about this, but I've looked at a lot of people have sent me their applications and that sort of thing to look over. And I see this a lot where people talk about all these details of their experiments and the techniques they did, but they're really missing talking about how it fits in and their interpretation of it. And it's totally okay if you like made this tiny little thing and it's not like something that's going to like cure cancer right away or something, but you should be able to kind of see how this could lead places and why it's helpful and that sort of thing. And so even if it's a little thing, you should be able to see like the broader implications even on a small scale. Okay, so that's like talking about your research. So now, like some of the questions that you should be prepared to answer. So I guess now we're gonna still going back to preparation. I don't know. This is kind of like a all over the place talk, and I apologize. But so some of the more like broad questions that you're likely to get asked are like, so what do you like best about research? And what do you like least about research? And so this goes back to the whole like, there's aspects that you should have this passion for research, but also like have a realistic mindset that there are things that that you don't like about like doing research, or there are like things like that. So basically this is kind of like having passion, but also having a realistic perspective about what science really entails. And this is another important thing about having research experience, is they want to know that you know what you're getting into. And so you might find that one of the questions that you get asked, I know I got asked a lot, was like, are your parents scientists? And I was like, no. And so it's like they want to, I've gotten the impression that they're asking because a lot of people kind of go into the, like they kind of see PhD as like what's expected of them, or at least just like they don't know what the next step is after college. And so they like, okay, well, I guess I should go the next step of school. I've been in school all my life, so next up is grad school, right? But it's really important that you actually want to be doing it. You want to be going there. You want that. And so like another question which I really hate is like, how did you get interested in science? And it's okay if you don't have like an aha moment. Like I don't. I just like, I've always been interested in science. And then when I realized I could do it for like in grad school, like that you could actually be a scientist for a living, then I got really excited and started looking into PhD programs instead of medical school programs. And so it's totally okay if you don't have like an aha story. You don't need to have some sort of like dramatic story about the first time you saw a ladybug or something. It's totally fine if you have one. It's totally fine if you don't. But know that that's the likely question that you're going to get. What was your favorite course in undergrad? And this can also, I would say, like, it's okay if it's not like some super high level, like advanced, some blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But basically, like, I was really scared because I was coming from a liberal arts school and I had, so I didn't take as many science classes as some people at like a science focused research institution would have taken, but I took a lot of other classes that really expanded my worldview. And so I think it's okay to have more of a broader range of courses and stuff in your undergrad as well. And so I probably said OChem. I don't know. I really loved OChem. But anyway, then why do you want to get a PhD? And also I should go back to why you wanted to Lemore's question about like, why are you looking at that particular graduate school and program? So when you're doing your homework and stuff, you should know like some specific things about that program that really appeal to you. Like here, it was this really small class sizes, and it was the fact that there were all these great meetings and courses going on, and the fact like there were all these various aspects of the program that I liked. And then there were other schools where there were various aspects of that program that I liked. So you should have done some work beforehand. They're going to be telling you a ton about their school. And like they'll be sending you all sorts of information about your school. If you're there, you're going to be going through like a bunch of different talks from different people and different departments and all this different stuff. I'm trying to tell you things about your school. And so then when they're like, "Do you have any questions?" It's like, "I've been reading your material for like 5 months because I'm so excited and nervous about this interview, and I find this all really exciting." But basically, yeah. You should know what aspects of that school or that program really appeal to you and be able to tell them about that. And that also helps them see that you're passionate about their program in particular, and not just like, "Yeah, I want to go to grad school." You have a big name on your like we're top on the list or something of some school that make you money or something. No, you should be able to show that you like know why you want to go to that program in particular. But it's okay if you don't know exactly what you want to research. Just be sure that you know that you want to research. And so back to Alexandra, you're not expected to know what your thesis research will be. It's more important that you have a passion for science. Your thesis work is training and not necessarily the research area you will devote your career to. You can fine tune that for your postdoctoral studies, but you should be able to explain what you love about research and why you want to go to graduate school in a particular area. So I think this is really important too. So when you're applying to one of these like sort of like more umbrella programs or whatever, where you're applying to the program and you're not applying to a lab directly, you're going to be doing rotations in various labs before you actually make a decision about which lab to join. Even then, it's not like you're just like, I can research whatever the heck I want. No, these people, even though like, so they want to, you're in a training program, but you're not just like willy-nilly learning whatever the heck you want. You're going to be in someone's lab, and that lab is going to have a particular focus. And although you'll have some independence within the lab, fine-tuning your project and maybe choosing your initial project out of some options, it's not like you're just off the fly, like expected to come up with some research project. But so you're also, so that's relieving in one sense, but it's also can be a bit limiting that you can't research exactly that one problem that you've been really interested in. But that doesn't mean that later in your career you can't. And so you're not going to be tied down with what you're doing in your thesis work, and especially, and like a lot of times you're like your PIs won't want you to take the work with them, because like it's like their project, you know. And so you can work on like totally different things in your postdoc, and then in further career wherever you go. So don't worry about being like tied down by the options you have, but you should, if it's one of these programs, you should make sure that there are labs whose research interests you, and not just like a single lab that may or may not be able to take you on as a student. And so you should be able to see yourself being happy in multiple different labs there, but know that there will never be like there will probably never be one that's doing exactly the thing that you think you want to do, and know that what you think you want to do might totally change. And so that's totally fine. And grad school is about learning techniques, learning skills, learning mindsets, and also learning about yourself, and what you're really interested in, and know that there's like no one right course, no one right path. And really just try to enjoy the journey as much as you can. So to everybody who's going into interviews, I wish you all the best of luck. Remember to be yourself, and to really congratulate yourself for making it this far, no matter what happens next. And so congratulations, you really deserve this. So go shine.